Welcome to another transformative vlog journey. Journey through the Tarot. Let's talk. Hi empaths, welcome back to Journey Through the Tarot. This week we're focusing on the Fool. Journey with the Fool card and introducing the Magician. So this journey is inspired by this book I picked up, Dirty and Divine, A Transformative Journey Through Tarot by Alice B. Grist. It's a great book and inspired idea. So that's where I got my inspiration to do this vlog journey with each tarot card. And also one of my tarot teachers, Robert M. Place, I'm using his book for a lot of information. The Tarot History, Symbolism, and Divination, Robert M. Place. So you might want to pick up this book or Alice's book if that calls to you, as well as my understanding of tarot from practicing and my journey with it. I'll also be using the symbols based on the Rider deck, right? The Rider Tarot deck, sometimes also referred to as Rider Waite or Waite Smith deck. Okay. So my week with the Fool. And, you know, going back to the Fool card from last week, a fool's journey, right? This is a fool's journey, first step in a new journey. Leap of faith, innocence, resonates with the element of air, not accounting for wisdom and enlightenment. So I journaled this week, so hopefully you're following along with your journal, right? You grabbed yourself a journal or a notebook, whatever you have handy. Don't feel compelled to purchase new things, right? If you don't want to, use what you got. And so the Fool card week, I wrote collaborations fell through or were delayed because I made a new rule for myself that I'd be hands off and not waste mental energy trying to manage other people. It's a learning curve for me. I'm working on it. Not trying to manage other people who have more to gain from the collab than I do anyway, right? I was just like, in last week's introduction to this journey, I talked about how this was meant to be a collaboration, and I was like, all you have to do is show up and share your experiences. I'll film it, I'll edit it, I'll send you the file. You just have to upload it to your channel. And it just felt like it was pulling teeth a little bit. It was a little too much effort for me to even get the person to show up. So I was like, okay, no blame game or brooding on it, stewing on it, or holding a grudge. Just do the journey yourself. That's always my message, it seems. My takeaway from lessons is, as a hermit, right, in part hermit in the human design system, right? Look up your chart, humandesignamerica.com. I am part hermit, so a lot of my lessons are, you need to handle this alone. You go inside, and as someone who in that same system is really well self-defined, right? Self-defined. So I get that guidance a lot. Go within, do it yourself. Heal alone. It's a solo journey. And as I said, there's one person in this card, right? One person in the Fool card, Fool's journey. So I just made the executive decision. If I want to be on time, reserve my energy and make it to the end of this tarot journey, I need to go it alone rather than try to add another element that I can't control. So just taking control. There are always elements that you can't control when you're working with media, the internet, like social media, the internet, all of that stuff. There's always elements that are frustrating that you can't control. Why add something else, right? Also, I've been leaning on my faith on a higher power, leaning on my faith in a higher power when it comes to purpose and finances. I quit an extremely toxic job and decided to commit and follow where I'm led in my life purpose, trusting that money and success would be side effects of my faith, and going where I'm guided, right? Taking appropriate action when called to. It's been working out, and whenever I'm in a pinch with money, I go back to surrender, receptivity, and allowing the consciousness of money to flow into my business. The fool is following a vision and trusting that he'll fly, not plunge to his death. Right? Clearly, the fool has a vision and he's just taking that first step. So I've been guided to do that. And it's all kind of led to this space where learning when to surrender, right? Learning when to know what I know and maybe have preconceived notions, but being willing to say, this is what I want or something better, right? And then being guided and just trusting where I'm led. As I hone my skills in alchemy, I release expectations and attachment to specific outcomes, instead listening to how things want to be birthed and going with it. Releasing control of the process, which has strengthened connection to my divine feminine essence. And healing relationships to both parents as I take my place in the family system. Right? Sometimes overdoing for a woman can be over-identification with father, still in the sphere of influence of father. And we're most powerful by accepting our divine essence, our biological makeup, right? As a woman, I'm most powerful because I also have a lot of feminine energy, is calling on that, utilizing it instead of always seeking the masculine approach to things. And this is something I've been deconstructing, right? Because we're conditioned to be masculine in our process, because that's the paradigm of success, right? We look out and we look for inspiration about how to succeed. We see the masculine approach quite often. And then anything that's sort of feminine, right? Like intuition, magic, or anything even in our body, right? Using our bodies, wisdom. It's seen as evil sometimes, right? Or it's just vilified or seen as not as valid or important. And as women, as a woman, I can only speak for myself. I'm finding that that's where the fool's journey comes in for me too, is trusting that, I have amazing mentors too, who have a feminine process, what I would call a feminine approach. They don't always label it that way, but that's how I see it, is learning to receive, learning to become a magnet instead of always going out and doing, right? And that's how I work with clients. So, because that's been my journey, is really fine-tuning and honing those skills of intuition, of inner knowing, of connection to a higher power and co-creative forces, and working with that to in the manifestation process. So means being a better receiver, being a better receiver of support instead of just always being the support, and being, summoned into my masculine energy all the time to provide for people, to protect their inner children, to do, and then being left hanging. So I've been calling other people to step up their friendship game too. Right, and taking my position in the family system, that's something Family Constellations teaches, something I'm trained in, something I also work within when I work with clients, is as adults, we take our place in the system. Meaning, if there's disorder in the system, as children, we come in and we attune to the system of the family. We see where we're needed. We assess in this intuitive process, this unconscious process of making an agreement, right? As a baby, you're not really equipped to do so. So it's an unconscious thing where I start seeing what the needs of the family are, and I fill in those gaps. Maybe no one's expressing emotion, so I carry the emotions. Maybe parent is deeply wounded or regressed themselves. Trauma from childhood leaves them, right? Unable to mature in a certain aspect. I caregive for them. I become parent. I step up. So we look at these things, and part of maturation is seeing where maybe I'm turned around to caregive for a parent, and then life force energy's pooling, and it's creating irritation for me, resentments, right? Life force energy wants to flow forward towards the future. So what I mean by taking your place in the family system is you're the future. So anything that's in order, parents would be behind you in the order. So if you're caregiving for mom up here, it's out of order and it's too heavy for you. So it's your job to take your place. It's not easy to do so. I'm not saying like it's just step there. Right? It comes with some breaking contracts, right? Consciously as well as unconsciously, because we're not conscious of all of them. Walking through some guilt, being shamed possibly for changing, right? Sometimes we're shamed into not changing because change can be scary because it comes with a lot of uncertainty. And the ones who are the most vested interest in keeping us around, the people that love us the most, oftentimes create the most issue and trouble for us when we're working on that transformative process. So it's not a simple thing, but sometimes it can be. So just allow it to be what it is, taking that place. It might not happen all at once. There might need to be some resolution or expressing of some emotions, whatever it is. And that's what family constellation helps with, right? Helping you take the proper place, pointed towards your future, your purpose, your destiny, and allowing those that came before you to be resources for you instead of the other way around. Yeah, it's very interesting work. The fool has no preconceived notions due to his lack of experience. He also has relinquished all control, which could ultimately lead to his downfall, but he trusts where he is being guided. Right, and he's also maybe making his own way. He's a traveler. He has all of his belongings in that little sack, right? Making his way. The sun's behind him, right? So either, depending on where it falls in the spread, it may mean he's ignoring wisdom and leading with his own will, right? As his abdomen looks to be jutted out that way, right? Maybe leading with his own will and ignoring wisdom. Or it could also be having faith that he has all he needs and that he's integrated the right lessons to take this journey. So it can also be that. It just look where it falls in the spread. You also might want to consider, if you're doing this for reading purposes, for divination, where the fool is pointed in the spread, what direction he's facing, what he's leaving behind. That's how Robert reads, right? And that's how a storyteller approach is, right? Where you're creating a story with the cards and you see where the fool's headed, what he's leaving behind in his journey. Okay. It can also be poor judgment, right? Because as you can see, the fool, despite the dog's warning, his companion's warning, he's headed in a direction that could be to his detriment. So if you're reading with this and this card shows up, you want to just look where it falls and what's surrounding it to really get the meaning, as with any card, right? Could be poor judgment. So I have been assessing and renegotiating agreements, like I said, in relationships that leave me carrying everything, shouldering all the burdens, being the responsible party, giving unconditional motherly love, and getting treated like a doormat. Having my loving, caring, empathic heart used against me by others crying out for allies who have zero intent of being an ally to me or considering my needs or feelings really along the way. No respect. And I say zero, interestingly. This is the 0 card, so that's funny. Only card with a number, right? Only card with an Arabic numeral. Everything else is Roman numeral. So up until now, I've been on this fool's journey, listening to the cries of people in need of my loving support and abandoning my own needs along the way. That's very foolish of me, right? That's bad judgment. Went out of focus. That's poor judgment, right? Because it's up to me to care for my needs. Other people might be assuming my needs are getting met because I never speak up and I'm just always available to meet theirs. And that's been the agreement up until now. And there's something in my energy field that's creating those paradigms. So I have to go inside and do inner work to discreate that experience. And part of that is taking the proper place instead of being caregiver to parents, carrying emotions of the family. This is part of the work, right? Creating new agreements. So not playing the blame game is my point. It doesn't help. It doesn't serve me to be angry at the people who are just a reflection of the experience I'm putting out there, the energy I'm putting out there. I'm really good at not holding grudges, but I am learning to be firm in my boundaries and know that others probably aren't on such an intense transformative journey, and they'll most likely show up in the same way they have in the past with the same behaviors and habits. So it's up to others to be willing to change and transform too. It's not all on me. Just like it's not all on me to carry the burden in relationship, it's not all on me to do the changing either. I also have to assess if someone comes back into my life, have they been transforming? Have they been changing? They may never resonate back either, right? That might be another consequence of my transformation. I just might never resonate again with people who I once did. I also hear a lot, you're an empath, so I know I can trust you. I feel safe with you. I feel safe just unloading my entire burden onto you. Right, empaths sound familiar. I just feel so comfortable telling you my whole life story. Meanwhile, I go to them for support and hear either crickets, very unhelpful, terrible advice, or the conversation gets turned back to them and their drama, or I have to expend more energy to teach them how to be a friend, or they have no capacity to hear and see me due to their own wounding. So as empaths, we do attract wounded people in need of healing. They're clients, they're not friends. And I've been treating friends like clients. And I think there's no harm in offering tools and help and support for people who need it, holding space. But if it's never reciprocated, never, you got to rethink, right? You got to re-strategize that, because that's not sustainable and you'll end up resenting. Particularly if someone is just so wrapped up in their own stuff, they can never be there for you in the same way. My friend Eugenia, who turned me on to Unleash the Power Within with Tony Robbins, as well as Mama Gina's School of Womanly Arts, she once said to me that she had friends who refused to associate with her until she leveled up in her life. And she thought that was so cruel. And then she said she understood once she started shifting and transforming and investing in herself and her own growth and development, that she understood that that sometimes it's just, if people can't grow with you, it will keep you stuck in a loop. It'll keep you like you're carrying the weight for all these people, and you have to weigh if you're willing to miss out on things because of other people's wounds and unwillingness to heal. You know, you have choice. You do have choice. It's not to take away your choice, and I think that's also like the fool's journey. Just a single person in that card. Sometimes when you're on a healing path, you need alone time to really get to that next level. So at one point, I co-created these connections to make myself irreplaceable out of a fear of being alone. So I stepped up and offered free healing readings, services. Meanwhile, I continue to pay healers and mentors and invest in trainings and education. So this is not a good deal for me, or fair for my paying clients either, right? So I find myself renegotiating, upholding boundaries, and sometimes closing the door on people with their hands out to me constantly. Just being more aware of scam artists and bad deals for me. They're everywhere, right? Living in New York City for 12 years, I've often projected my good intentions and loving heart onto people and thought I understood where they were coming from because this is how I am and this is my way of being in my nature. But I also have the gift of being an outsider, like the fool, an observer. I was never pressured. I don't feel the pressures maybe as other people do now because I never fit in. So for me, I have my own value system. I have my own morals rather, and my own idea of integrity. And I don't feel the pressures maybe other people do. Like my reasoning might be different than other people's because I really don't have anything to lose as an outsider. Remember how we learned last week that the fool was an outsider in the Marseille deck, right? The Marseille deck, the dog is chewing up his pant leg, treating him like a stranger, treating him like an outsider. The dog's been reinvented as a companion on the journey here, but in when the occult took over the symbolism. But so that's a gift in and of itself. I just remember just not understanding other people's motivations and not really understanding human interaction in that sense because I was always so alone. I was always such a loner, and I felt unaccepted. Didn't understand my participation in that, but I think that has become a gift because I don't have the same need for acceptance, I guess, in a way. And I've been able to be alone with my thoughts and really think things through and sort of see maybe more things for what they are, see other people's motivations, and see them in myself, have the time to actually reflect and see how I'm doing that too, and maybe deconstruct it or reinvent it in some way, right? That's what you can do in solitude. When you're an outsider, you've plenty of time to do that. So I'm starting to see that as a gift in being able to think in a unique, original way, and not be so, I guess, locked in to what's being presented as opposed to what's actually there, right? So if you find yourself alone a lot, if your biggest heartbreak and heartache in life is that you're alone, can you see the gift in that in a way? Because maybe part of the reason is because you can see right through things, and it's just, and you're able to weigh out your options more clearly without this intense need. Not that we don't need other people, we are interdependent as humans, but have an original creative way of thinking and seeing the world. I think that's a gift. Yeah, and having been scammed so many times, or just making bad investments, right? Being swayed emotionally, right? Like really great scam artists and salespeople know to play on your emotions, and read you in that way and see your vulnerabilities and use them and play on them. And I think I have allowed that to happen because not everyone's selling a product. Some people are selling an image or ideas or political stance or whatever it is, right? A lot of people are selling something. And I mean, even I do probably unconsciously. I don't perceive that I have a vested interest in you believing what I believe. I don't feel like I have to convince you of anything. If you don't see things the way I see them, that's okay with me. But again, that's a gift of an outsider. Trust I've done my research. Trust I've lived through it, or I wouldn't even be talking about it. I wouldn't waste my breath. But I'm not here to convince you of it. You're taking this journey with me, or you're sitting there in judgment of me, or whatever you're doing, right? It's like, not that I don't have similar needs of people to connect and be respected and loved. I certainly do. But I do think there is a certain advantage of being that outsider, at least for a time in my life. There are disadvantages too. I'm not saying it's all advantages, but so also owning the Fool card in me helps me recognize it in others and respond appropriately. Right? Because other people are coming from their own experiences. Other people have learned from what they've been through. Other people need to go through what they need to go through. You can't prevent other people from taking that first step in the Fool's journey. It's something that's necessary to go through. And that also shows up in my human design chart as role model, right? I'm role model hermit. Role models need to make a lot of mistakes to learn, to have something to offer to share. They're often late bloomers because they have to make a lot of missteps and mistakes and really learn from them. And that is the strategy for really, for self-actualization, for personal power and ability to cope properly in the world. So if you look up your human design chart and you see 6-2 role model hermit, you're much like me in that way. Also this week I saw the Judy Garland movie Judy, starring Renee Zellweger. I mean, it was the Fool's journey on the big screen. She got into the business. I think, if I'm not mistaken, she had typical stage mother, like, who pushed her into the business. And she was really used and abused. And at the end of her life, really had nothing really had nothing to show for all the hard work, right? Except people loving her, people adoring her. And I think what they were intending to show was that that's really all she wanted, but she didn't have security. She didn't have finances, right? So it's crazy how she was used. But it was like that Fool's Journey. And it's interesting how the Wizard of Oz, what she's probably best known for, is a journey back to self, right? Back to personal power. It starts with chaos, right? The tornado, but it's also Yellow Brick Road, and yellow is in a lot of these cards, right? The yellow backgrounds. So that's very interesting. And just the pain and heartache she went through. She wasn't really given the tools to make proper decisions. And you can see her, like, I knew of the tragedy, and just seeing it play out on the big screen. And Renee Zellweger is amazing. She is phenomenal. Just channeling. Like, there were moments where you will actually see Judy Garland on the screen. You have to see it. It's so good. And you can see her, how she made decisions for other people, for the best interest of others. And that's how she was conditioned. She was conditioned to do so from a very young age, to do things for show, right? Instead of actually feeling it. And there's a scene at the end of the movie where it appears like she's tasting cake for the first time. Like, parties and things were staged for her as a young girl, but she wasn't meant to enjoy any of it. So she wasn't even allowed to taste the cake or anything like that. So, like, her whole life was staged for this image. And then at the end of the movie, she actually takes a bite of cake and is like, that's delicious. Like, she was never really living life for herself. Very interesting, except when she was enjoying applause or praise from an audience, that she was able to take in and really enjoy it. But I did also note that there were ways where she was a really good receiver, particularly in the attraction phase of relationship. But then when her wounds became triggered, like, as soon as you like study something like family constellation or whatever, or relationship coaching, whatever it is, differences in men and women, you see it everywhere, right? You can't, or film even, like, you study acting, there's no way you can just sit back and enjoy. You're always like, oh, I see this now, I see, right? So, yeah, I did notice, and you know, it's a biopic, but you know, there are, you know, taking artistic liberties in it. So it's not like her up there, so I don't know if this was actually her, but I can assume, like, she was really great at, she was probably very fun to be around until you got to the wounding of the young child whose needs weren't met, right? And doing all of this for others and then never receiving in return. Like, I could relate to her so deeply, her loneliness, just wanting to be around others sometimes. And yeah, like, it's so amazing how your story doesn't have to be the same as another's, but you can see their pain and understand and feel it too and empathize. Yeah, it was beautiful. Um, so, so working with the Fool card is also sort of like working with that shadow aspect. You're working with the light qualities and the shadow, right? So anytime you work on the shadow aspects of an archetype, you gain self-awareness and power in that it doesn't sneak up on you. It doesn't come in the back door, right? You own it in yourself, so you're able to see it in others and not have a reaction, not be as reactive. That's what self-acceptance and integration can really help with. You're no longer this charged entity going around reacting at everything. You can observe, and you're far less hooked in, susceptible to that. So I find that working with this archetype this week, I'm gaining self-awareness and connection to a higher power, and an understanding of the process, that there is some structure that we're all working within, and allowing co-creative forces to work within that structure as well. So we might say in the manifestation process, this is my goal, right? I'd like to achieve this, or receive this, or create this, and add or something better. Or something better. Be aware and mindful that it's not just you, it's not just your will. And then take that first guided baby step, trusting that there will be synchronicities and signposts along the way, just like the messenger of the dog, right? The dog shows up and says, hey, there's a ledge. So it's not just relying all on divine, not relying all on the co-creative forces, taking accountability for your own well-being too, which is interesting because, and seeing the signposts and meaning around you in your environment. It's interesting that came up for me with relationship, right? And being aware of how I'm contributing and renegotiating those agreements. I've always been attuned and aware of that, and updating and upgrading, you know. But I think this process really amplifies and accelerates. That's why I love to do journeys like this, where we use something as a focusing tool, like the tarot. I mean, what an inspired idea. Thank you, Alice B. Grist. Alice B. Yes, Alice B. Grist. And then the rose, the white rose that the Fool is holding. In the Golden Dawn, it's a symbol of silence and rebirth. It can also symbolize purity and reminds us to cleanse the mind. So, which is interesting about the outsider, right? Like I was saying, silence and rebirth. You do those things alone, don't you? And being able to be silent in solitude can give you those gifts of insight that you might be distracting yourself from. Maybe you don't want to look at it or see it clearly. Interestingly, our environment can provide so much symbolism and meaning and support on this journey. Anytime a friend has something happen, or sees an animal, or sees an insect, or something happens in their environment or surroundings or at work, I'll be like, let's look at the dream symbolism of that, because I believe it has meaning in our waking life too. Why is this any different than a dream, right? So I believe in the symbolism there, and I always research the symbol of what happened. Like my friend had a cracked toilet seat, and she kept talking, and I researched what that meant in a dream, and it meant detachment, and it is exactly what she was going through. So I was like, you're never going to believe this. And it was the exact word she had used, right? So I'm known for that. I'm always like, what does that mean? What's the meaning? Looking for the meaning. And today I was taking a shower, and there was just enough hot water for me to finish like rinsing my hair and finish the shower before I'd be standing in just a freezing cold water, cascade of water. And that reminded me to be grateful, right? There might have been a time where I'd have been so angry that there wasn't enough, but there was just enough. And in this leg of the journey, in this fresh start in this new journey, I'm much more aware and mindful that there are people that don't have any running water or hot water at all. So, and not too far back in my ancestry, they weren't blessed with such luxury. And so I was able to see the value again and be redirected to a state of gratitude for this modern convenience and time saver and really enjoy it due to its limitation in my shower experience today. And I think that goes for relationship too, right? If you're always there, if you're always available, you're never taking those moments of solitude. It's the limit of that experience that makes you value it, right? If you know that something is coming to an end, your emotions get enhanced and triggered, don't they? And you start savoring and being present. Well, life is like that, isn't it? So we get these reminders. Can we find the meaning there? Right? Much like the dog is a messenger. There's messengers all around us all the time, right? I use the radio, songs coming on the radio. Now, if they play the same songs all the time, maybe not. But if I hear a song randomly or a song comes in my head, I'm like, what is the meaning there? Right? I'm always looking for the meaning because I believe all things have meaning. Which is probably why I'm a reader. I look for the meaning. Right, so that the shower experience with the limitation of the hot water, it resensitized me. It put me back in a state of wonder at this modern convenience. And I was able to see through my ancestors' eyes as progress. So I could be grateful and I could see, look, we're progressing here. Because after doing family constellation work, I'm so aware that I'm not alone, that I have this ancestral system backing me up, guiding me through, moving through me, pushing me to the future. And I can celebrate the progress with them. It's really a beautiful experience. Like it's hard to feel alone when you feel so connected, when you feel the wingspan of your ancestors, when you feel the connection of a higher power, you just feel so supported, warm, held. And it's all in the mind. It's all what you do with your mind. It's incredible. And that brings me to the feather in the cap, which is a symbol of air. It's also pointed to the sun to symbolize enlightenment. But a feather blows in the air, right? And it's interesting. I associate breath with air and breathing, right? And this week in the Business Alchemy program that I'm participating in for the year, we learned to inhale through one nostril and then exhale out the other, and then reverse it, breathing through the individual nostrils mindfully to create either a state of alertness or relaxation, which is very interesting. I had heard about that, but I didn't really understand why you would do it. And then the blocks, if one of the nostrils is blocked, it has meaning. It's very, very interesting. So we did work with the breath. We always work with the breath, but, and then hearing my wind chimes symbolizes air to me, and they've been going a lot because it's the wind's picking up, blowing the fall leaves around. So I've really been enjoying that. I have very little air in my chart, so the air, a cool breeze is very healing for me. And air is also about detachment from the emotions, having a detached bird's eye view in a way, right? In your logical mental process, or having a vision, right? And that really translated to not giving in to shame or guilt when I put myself first, and moving towards my vision for the future. So instead of sort of feeling this emotional pull, this empathy for others, and feeling like I can't move forward because I'll leave this person behind. I have this vivid memory from childhood at a family reunion where we were racing with our older cousins. My brother and I were two of the youngest children there for some reason. And we were in this race with all of our older cousins. And my brother was the youngest, and I was the second youngest in the race. And they yelled, "Go," and we were running. And I wasn't that far behind the older children, but I still had to really work to keep up. And I noticed that my little brother was really struggling to keep up. And so I kept running back to him and be like, "Come on, Mike, come on. And you can do it," and just running beside him because I just couldn't bear the thought of him being alone and having to go it alone. And I find that, I'm that little girl who wouldn't leave her brother's side. Not that he couldn't have done it alone, not that he couldn't have managed it emotionally if he was all alone. And, I just didn't want him to feel alone. I wanted him to feel like he had support and there was someone there with him. And I couldn't bear the thought of abandoning him. It was just a race, right? It didn't have that much meaning. But for me, I was so guided by this empathetic, loving heart that I would make choices that weren't best for me. And I would consider the other person first. And I still do that. So, not that I want to not do that, but I also need to be sure it's a win-win. There are times I can make concessions and sacrifices, but if I'm never considering myself, and empaths, we can sometimes do this, right? If we never consider ourselves and our well-being, what are we doing? That's unsustainable. We have to care for ourselves. The body has limitations. So, that's a wounding in the spiritual community too, that I should just be this endless pit of giving. I should just give and give and give and give until I'm laying on the floor. It's irrational. Let's stop it right now and just see this for what it is. It's a bad agreement. It's a bad deal. That loving heart best serves if you are taken care of. So this is the learning curve. That's okay. We can integrate that. And that's exactly what we're doing, right? And that's the Fool card. That's the Fool card. What were your experiences with the Fool card this week? Did you have other things? There were probably other things that I'm not considering, right? It's hard to keep it all in your mind. I tried to write down as much as possible, but share your experience with the Fool card in the comments. I'd love to hear how the connections you've made. Let me know, or make your own vlog series with this in mind and shout me out and let people know you were inspired by my idea. It'd be cool to do that together, right? It's a great way that you could have a little series on your channel or whatever platform, right? And so now we're introducing, for this week, we're going to work with the Magician. The Magician card. So a little history about the Magician. It's because remember, the Fool is not part of the allegory. The Fool is entering the journey. The first character in the first act, which leads from the Magician, which is 1 in Roman numeral, to the Chariot, which is 7 in Roman numeral, creates the first act for the story of the Tarot in the major arcana, the major events, right? And there are 3 acts because there's 21 cards in the major arcana. So there's 3 acts. So this is the first card in the first act of the story. In the oldest Italian woodcut decks, the magician was depicted as a street performer or trickster with an audience of 4 people wearing a limp-pointed brimless hat, with the only identifiable objects being a pair of dice at his table. And that was the oldest depiction of the magician. And then in the Marseille deck, he's adorning an unusual broad-brimmed hat and has a knife, a bag, and dice, can still be seen in most examples. The Marseille magician seems to be tempting people to gamble at a dice game, but his dice may also be seen as a tool for divination or making associations with the trump cards or major arcana cards of the tarot, as there are 21 combinations in the dice. Also in the Marseille deck, like the Fool, the magician is a jongleur or storyteller and a performer. Also, like the Fool, the magician can't beat any of the other trump cards in the playing card game, but is worth much more points or value in the hand when keeping score, which I find interesting. In ancient religion, the trickster, which is the archetype of the original depictions of the magician, encapsulates, was under the protection of Mercury, called Hermes in Greek, the god of gamblers, travelers, storytellers, dice, merchants, alchemists, magicians, liars, and thieves. So there is a Mercury association with the magician. And because of this history of the magician card, its association with Mercury is justified, even with its reinvention by occultists as the ceremonial magician, which is what you see depicted in the Waite-Smith deck. So in the Waite-Smith deck, or Rider-Waite, the Rider-Tarot deck, whatever you want to call it, the magician has no hat. Instead, there's an infinity symbol showing that the magician is connected to the timeless. But that's also reinforced by the fact that his belt is in Ouroboros, it's hard to pronounce, Ouroboros, which is a snake biting its tail, creating a circular symbol of time. Can you see that? So it's a snake biting its own tail, which is creating the belt of the magician, which is also a symbol of time. And Gnostics and Martionists also associated the number 8 with Christ. And this infinity symbol is 8 on its side, a figure 8 on its side, and can be linked to Christ consciousness or enlightenment. The magician stands in a garden of roses and lilies representing alchemical opposites. Red being equated to masculine and the fixed polarity, white being the feminine and volatile polarity. And then the objects at the magician's table are the 4 magical tools, which have become the suit symbols for the minor arcana in this deck and linked to the 4 elements. So pentacles are linked to earth, cups to water, swords to air, wands to fire. And the magician's relationship with these symbols aligns him with the 5th element, ether or spirit. At the top of the table leg, if it'll focus, the top of the table leg, there seem to be 3 letters which possibly spell Vin, V-I-N, Latin for wilt thou, the question that the magician poses. So that's a history of the magician card. And then for divination, it represents will, initiations, beginnings, as above, so below, the Hermetic axiom, The way of heaven should be manifested on earth. In the Hermetic texts, they tell us that it is our purpose given to us by God to complete his creation by making the world beautiful. The magician points the way, as above, so below, with the wand to the sky, the finger pointed down to the earth. As above, so below. Any thoughts of lacking control are nothing but false modesty, hiding your true potential. You are connected to forces and have the power within you to create change and transform your own life. Trust in your own personal power and have faith in the will of a higher power to co-create. Consider what you want to co-create and access your inner knowing, allowing co-creative forces to guide you. Ask for guidance and assistance from a higher power. Magnetize what you desire by aligning to it. See the meaning and guidance in your surroundings and circumstances and modify or utilize them to create inner transformation, and vice versa. Tap into your full potential and trust in knowing you have all the talent, capability, and resources at your disposal to succeed. Self-confidence, will, skill. Mercury is associated. It might also represent in divination the querent, particularly if the querent is male, a man asking the question. In the little book that comes with the deck, that's what's indicated, as well as it might also be indicate address or speech, sickness, pain, loss, disaster, but it may also mean manifestation, a well-rounded person having all the tools needed to learn and create. So we'll be living with the magician for this week. So think about all those things, keep them in your mind. Is there an area where you feel powerless? Don't trust in a higher power to co-create with you. You're maybe leaning on your own will entirely, or trying to give it all to the divine, not taking your part. We're finding balance in that. Right? Divine will here on earth. How can we move towards our purpose and be more resourceful with what we already have, in touch with the timeless part of us. I think we can resonate with that, right, empaths? So now that we know a little bit more about the magician card, I'm going to use my crystal singing bowl. We're going to go in and manifest that a little bit, integrate some of the lessons we learned from the Fool, and help us transition into the week with the magician. So close your eyes, get in tune with your breath, and allow the vibration of the singing bowl to get you in tune and in touch with the magician archetype inside, all the things we just heard about the magician, the history, and allow that to carry out with the sound vibration of the bowl so that we can create experiences outside of ourselves to help learn from this powerful archetype. Beautiful. All right, have a great week with the magician card. Getting in touch with your own power and ability to magnetize and co-create the reality you want. Any more information about me and how to connect with me will be in the description. If you want to work with me, getting in tune with your own inner knowing and ability to co-create, let's do a session together. Find me on Instagram, urban_empath. I'm doing other content over there and sharing. It'd be great to connect with you there. And leave a comment and let me know how you're experiencing this process along with me. All right. Have a great week. I will see you next week with our experience with the magician. All right. Bye, Empath.